Hello, this is David from DN Cognitive Counseling. Tonight I want to respond to a few comments made on my last two videos, and I want to thank everybody who's commented on them, and I hope that you will be comfortable enough to continue to be able to make comments, questions, or thoughts. So I'm just going to take the first two comments that are a little smaller on the video I did, a closer look at privilege and systematic racism. The first one is from Eve, which says, I can't understand how anyone would not like this, as it was a fair and balanced, and it was filled with hope and asking good questions. If you don't like this, you should say why. Well, Eve, I happen to agree. I do not mind criticism. I think criticism is actually one of the best gift that anybody can give you. Somebody telling you that you're doing something that is not right or wrong, something that is hurtful or destructive, will basically lead me not to do the best job or function as best as I can. So criticism is actually something that can help you grow. So I don't mind criticism at all. I actually welcome it. Corey, not too long ago, gave me a criticism on a video, and I would have loved to have heard his response back, because I would love to have heard his response to my response to his criticism. Would it have been, well, I don't want to hear about it anyway, and just dismissive? Or would it have been, wow, I can actually see that? Jen has given me a couple of times criticism on this channel, and then we've had conversation back and forth, and she's like, oh, wow, I see what you're talking about there. And then other times she's like, well, I'm going to disagree with that anyway, which is absolutely her right. And it's actually a good thing, because I get to be able to hear another point of view and be able to have a conversation about it. And it opens it up for other people to hear it. So asking somebody why they dislike something is much more important than the dislike. For me, the comments are much more important than the likes and dislikes. I would say that likes to dislike ratio, I'm very, very high on the like ratio, very low on the dislikes ratio. But for me, I'd rather get more dislike comments explaining the dislike, why they dislike it. Which piggybacks to what Ed stated on the same video. I can't believe anyone would dislike this video. I guess a racist saw this video. There was nothing to dislike other than seeing that there's hope in communication, understanding one another. Now, Ed, I actually see it the same way you did. I wouldn't necessarily say the person that disliked it would be a racist. Could be that they disliked it for a variety of different reasons. They might have not liked my hat. They might have not liked the way that I said something. They might have not liked, who knows. But without knowing that, I wouldn't make the assumption that necessarily they're a racist. On the same token, I think, again, like you and Eve both see, that stating I dislike something without stating it just leaves you with nothing. So those two comments, I very much appreciate both of you in terms of that feedback. And I'm glad both of you obviously liked the video and thought there were very good things in it. And I will say that the feedback that I've got on that video has been very, very positive. And I'm very glad, especially considering the climate right now. The person that I actually made that specific video to start with for, they also very much liked it, even though they said they want to still think about it more. And again, I did put a lot in there to make people have to question certain things. Everything is not as simple as, well, I believe this and it's over. There's a lot of emotion right now, and people are very high on that emotional spectrum. And when you get very emotional and you make emotional decisions, normally things don't go so well. So we have to be able to curtail some of the emotion and be able to have a dialogue. To the next question, and this came from Ephraim. And that was in the video, Is Honesty Always the Best Policy 3. This was Ephraim's response. You said that people contemplating suicide lose their right to privacy because we say they are not in the right frame of mind to make those kinds of decisions. Obviously, I hope people don't commit suicide and they get the help so they can actually carry out plans like that. I think you mean so they actually can't carry out plans like that, but they actually carry out plans like that. But I wonder if we can really say that they lose their rights to privacy. An example, sometimes people panic when they hear bad news or something scares them, and they make the wrong decision and overreact. While they're not good, and it's irrational, we don't say they lose their right to privacy. Why is it different in a case when a person's thought process may be irrational? Again, I certainly hope that anybody contemplating suicide would get the help and not do the act on those thoughts. Also, how do we know it's necessarily irrational? What if somebody has a terminal illness and even with medicine they're in agony? Would we still say it's irrational? These are excellent points and questions, so I'm going to take each one and try to help to have this conversation, because it's really good what you brought up. And you actually brought up something that's going to be very philosophically deep. So I apologize for those of you who might be bored for a moment. I'm going to try to explain this in the most simplistic way I can without getting too deep in the philosophical, but I'm going to have to hit some of the philosophical points to be able to explain this. First off, when the person loses their right to privacy, it doesn't mean that you get to say everything about them. You know, when a person is suicidal, you don't get to go and say, well, by the way, he also was abused as a child and these things happened to them. That would still be illegal. When I said the right to privacy, it means that when the person tells you that they're feeling this way, that and only that becomes a loss of the privacy. Everything else about them still remains privacy and they still have the right to privacy. But the nature by which they want to kill themselves and the manner they wish to want to do it and all the things that will get them the help have to be disclosed. Unless the sexual abuse as a child was directly related to that suicidal attempt, in which case then that would also go along it. But assuming for a minute it wasn't, then you would have no right to disclose what happened in third grade to his friends and all that other stuff he told you that was private. So when I say a loss to the right to privacy, it's not a blanket statement that all privacy is given up. So I hope that it clarifies it. And thank you very much for the question, because it helps me to clarify sometimes what I take for granted when I say something and people go, that's not how you understand it, which is why I did that entire video on reflective listening. This is a very important aspect to be able to understand when you say something, sometimes people hear something else. So I very much appreciate that. So they don't lose the right to all privacy, just the privacy in relationship to the attempt. Now, the next part you asked is that what happens when somebody gets irrational? We don't lose the right to privacy. Well, it does depend. How irrational? Is it irrational that puts them in danger? Let's say they're not suicidal. Let's say and this has actually happened, they're not suicidal, but they're not going to eat. Their decision to not eat is they're a fear of choking. They're afraid to choke. And they're not going to eat because they have a fear of choking. Well, the fact remains that they're going to end up dead if they don't eat. So that irrational behavior becomes dangerous, and yes, they would lose their right to privacy at that point. So I hope that helps you to understand that depending on the level of the irrational behavior and how dangerous it is, then you would be able to do that. Now, if they're wearing underwear on their head and they're walking around with underwear on their head, as irrational as you may say that behavior is, that would not be something to lose their rights over or their right to privacy. So in that level, they wouldn't. Now, I hope that clarifies that and about how we make the decision about where it's irrational or rational in terms of safety to themselves or others. So if they're walking around with a machete and they're swinging the machete around, but they don't want to hurt themselves, they just want to swing the machete around, and their behavior is doing that, at that point also, it's a potential for killing somebody else or hurting somebody else, and they would absolutely lose their right at that point. So again, that's where those things come about. Now, the last part of your question is actually the most complex, and one that I'm not sure I'm going to do justice in a short answer. Now, you gave an example of somebody who's terminally ill and that they're in agony. This is one of the debates about what's called medical assisted suicides, or the idea of, does somebody have a right to die? Now, there are going to be different opinions on this, and I'm well aware of that. But right now in New York state law, and that's where I'm at, we do not have that right. We don't have the right to be able to die in that way. We have the right to take away pain. We can give people high doses of medications to lessen pain, but we don't have the right to kill. In other states, there have been, and I will tell you, philosophically, I do have a huge problem with this. And I'll explain to you why. And I'm just going to break it down for you this way. Somebody's in a lot of pain. And somebody says, my life is in this pain. I can't get rid of it. I'll never get better. I don't see any way out. And I want to die. And you said, well, how much time do you have left? Well, I only have going to live for 2 more days. Well, it's only 2 more days. Let's let them die. How about 3 more days? How about 5 more days? How about 10 more days? How about 5 years? How about 10 years? How about 12 years? How about 25 years? At what point do you draw the line where you say, that's the level I'm going to let you die at? So if I could tell you that you can have less than 6 months, your life has no meaning. I made mention before that I worked in hospice. And for us, our fight was for every day. Every day mattered. In fact, one of the things about my own life that I took out of hospice, and I actually has been a blessing to me, has been the fact that I've appreciated every day of life. Every day is another blessing, in a sense, because I'm not promised it. Nobody's promised tomorrow. So with that in mind, a day, even in agony, is still valuable and still has value. Let's say that day is the day that you're going to see your daughter get married. Or let's say that's the day that you get to see somebody that you love or care about that gives you a smile for one last time or one last moment. What are those moments worth? How much money would people pay for one day of life? For 1 week of life? And when we start to devalue that, it becomes a very quick, slippery slope. In Europe, there was a case of a 25-year-old girl who had been sexually assaulted, and she was in tremendous emotional pain. Now, I put the term emotional pain in quotes, not because I'm devaluing the pain, because the issue is, was that pain something she could never get over? Have there never been rape victims able to get over their emotional pain? And the answer is yes, I've worked with many of them. So what do you do when somebody says, I'm 25 years old and I'll never get over this, I'm never going to be able to? Well, they allowed her to kill herself. And that's the slope that I get very nervous about. I rather err on the side of too much life than too little, especially when it comes to medical bills. There have been family members that have pressured family members to want to get assisted medical suicides because it's going to cost the family too much, and the person's like, something's going to cost a lot of money. I should get out of here. And what happens, we put the level of the economics start making a decision of how we make medical decisions. Sadly, this happens in hospitals anyway. And it's not something I ever want to say is a good thing, nor should we ever promote. We should fight for as many lives as possible, for every day as possible. So I err on that side. So I will admit here there's an absolute bias on my position in terms of that I don't think that we should ever go to terminally, medicine killing people to end their life any earlier on purpose. Now, to end pain and go to high levels of medication that could possibly absolutely. I don't think anybody should have to sit in total agony and pain, and you have to do whatever you can to give them that pain. And if that kills them, that wasn't what your intention was. It's very different. Now, you might say it's nuanced, and it might be, but it's a difference in mentality. And that mentality difference creates the difference in your emotional reactions, and then it comes into practical points of how it's going to manifest. And then the slope moves. And we have moved slopes all over this country. Things that they said would never happen have happened. People making arguments, you're making a straw man argument. We'll never go past that. And we have. So this idea that we would never see that happen, I stay away from that argument, because at this point in history, anything is possible to happen. I hope that answered your question. I hope that you like this video and you'll hit like. And again, if you dislike the video, hit dislike, but tell me why. I'd love to hear it if you have a reason and a rationale. That helps me to be able to make better content for you. And again, if you have a question or a comment, please feel free to put it down there. And of course, if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you'd like to become a patron to this endeavor, you can go to the Subcribe-star link below. And thank you very much. Have a good night and good mental health.